The Case Files, Mind of Madness, The Town Without Trace, The Unsolved Case of Manon Dubé. Sherbrooke in 1977. Welcome to the Case Files, Mind of Madness. The deep Canadian winter is often romanticized, a blanket of fresh, silencing snow. But in December of 1977, in the city of Sherbrooke, Quebec, that silence became terrifying. This is a story about a community that believed itself immune to the violence of the world, only to discover a darkness hidden in the snow, a darkness that claimed one of its own. Sherbrooke at the time was a thriving, close-knit industrial hub, known for its textile mills and paper production. It sat in the eastern townships, a region where community trust was paramount, and the greatest threat was usually the weather. Our focus is on a 14-year-old girl, Manon Dubé. She was vibrant, full of the restless energy common to teenagers on the cusp of adulthood. Manon was a secondary school student, responsible, and had secured herself a small taste of independence, a part-time job at a local restaurant. She was saving money, planning her future, and fully engaged in her young life. She was last seen wearing a distinctive outfit, a bright, almost defiant splash of red against the monochromatic landscape, a red winter coat, a dark cap, and matching red mittens. This detail, intended to keep her warm, would become the painful signature of her final moments. On a freezing Sunday in December, Manon Dubé vanished. Her disappearance launched one of the most agonizing and inconclusive investigations in the history of Quebec, exposing a pattern of predatory behavior in the region that continues to baffle cold case detectives today. As always, my name is Cody. I run this channel with my partner Katie. Welcome or welcome back to the Case Files, Minds of Madness. A reminder, if you do find today's video interesting and informative, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories told by yours truly. Now grab a snack and a blanket and let's dive in. The date was Sunday, December 11th, 1977. Manon had just finished her afternoon shift at a busy restaurant located near the downtown core of Sherbrooke, likely close to the major artery, Rue King. The shift ended around 4 p.m. In December, 4 p.m. is when the short winter day begins to surrender to the long night. The sun was low, the light was fading rapidly, and the temperature was already well below freezing. Manon's walk home was routine, a short, familiar route of perhaps a kilometer, taking her through a mix of commercial and residential areas toward her family home. A walk she could have done hundreds of times before. She signed out, waved goodbye to her coworkers, and stepped out into the biting air. This was the last moment anyone who knew her saw her alive. When the time for dinner came and passed, the family's worry was immediate. This was not Manon's behavior. She was punctual, responsible, and most importantly, she would never willingly remain outside in that kind of cold. The Canadian winter offers no mercy for delays or detours. Initial calls confirmed she had left the restaurant on time. Her parents immediately contacted the Sherbrooke police, setting in motion a search that would prove fruitless in its earliest, most crucial hours. The problem? The time gap. Even a short 15-minute walk provides a perfect window for a brief, opportunistic crime. The sheer number of potential witnesses on a major street, Rue King, should have provided answers, but the fading light and the speed of the act worked in the perpetrator's favor. The snow, heavy and fresh, swallowed any immediate identifiable evidence. The police had a missing girl, a short distance, and absolutely no trace. The environment itself was complicit in concealing the crime. The case was desperate for a solid lead, and eventually one surfaced, the only credible eyewitness account that would frame the investigation for decades. Two teenagers came forward. They reported seeing a girl matching Manon's description, specifically noting the distinctive red outerwear, near the restaurant shortly after 4 p.m. They didn't see her walking alone. They saw her getting into a car. The vehicle was described as a burgundy-colored sedan. The driver was a man in his mid-30s. This single piece of information was transformative. It confirmed foul play and immediately eliminated the runaway theory. Manon had not been lost, she had been taken. But the reliability of the sighting was under intense pressure. Could the teenagers be sure of the time, the color of the car, the man's age? They were certain enough for the police to act, but the vagueness allowed the perpetrator to slip back into the anonymous streets of Sherbrooke. Investigators quickly theorized three possibilities regarding the man. The acquaintance, someone Manon knew from work or the neighborhood, whom she trusted enough to accept a ride from on a cold evening. The transient worker. Given Sherbrooke's industrial nature, many men traveled through the region for temporary work. An out-of-town predator who had staked out the area. The opportunist, a local predator who spotted the vulnerable young girl walking alone in the darkening street and acted immediately. Police issued a public appeal for the owner of a burgundy sedan, launching a massive vehicle check. However, in the late 1970s, burgundy was a very common car color. The description was too generic to narrow the suspect pool significantly. The man and his car became phantoms, known only by a color, and they had vanished completely. The first few weeks of the search were brutal, battling the bitter cold, the heavy snow, and the mounting pressure from the media and the public. The lack of physical evidence at the presumed abduction site led investigators to believe the car must have carried Manon far away and quickly. The intense, localized search yielded nothing. The vast forested areas surrounding Sherbrooke, known as the Appalachian foothills, were impenetrable due to the frozen ground and heavy snowpack. The window of opportunity to find Manon alive had slammed shut. Then, 2 weeks after Manon's disappearance, the investigation was utterly derailed by an act of stunning cruelty. Police received an anonymous phone call, a tip originating from a payphone over 160 kilometers away in Montreal. The caller claimed to have seen a girl matching Manon's description in a bar located in the St. Roch neighborhood. The details were convincing enough. The police, desperate for a breakthrough and facing severe public criticism, made a fatal decision. They publicly declared the sighting credible. For Manon's family, this was momentary, dizzying relief. She wasn't dead, she was just lost in the city. For the police, it was a catastrophic diversion. Significant resources were immediately diverted from the cold woods and back roads of the eastern townships to the sprawling, anonymous metropolis of Montreal. Investigators spent critical weeks canvassing the rough-and-tumble St. Roch district, interviewing patrons, bar owners, and employees. They followed every possible thread, believing they were tracking a runaway or perhaps an abducted girl being held captive in the big city. The search was a farce. The sighting was fabricated. The call was a malicious hoax. When the Montreal leads evaporated completely, the realization hit with the force of a physical blow. Someone had deliberately wasted police time, money, and most importantly, the precious window of time that could have been used to search the rural areas closer to Sherbrooke. The perpetrator of the hoax remains unknown, a cold, dark influence on the case. Their call essentially acted as an accomplice to the crime, giving the real killer an undisturbed 2-week head start to secure and conceal their victim. The official search returned to Sherbrooke, but the morale was broken, and the snow had grown deeper, sealing the region until spring. The silence was finally broken on March 24, 1978, Good Friday, 2.5 agonizing months after Manon was taken. The location was remote, far from the city of Sherbrooke, about 30 kilometers 19 miles away, deep in a rural area. 2 teenage boys from Montreal, ironically, discovered the body while driving down an isolated country road. Manon Dubé was found face down in a shallow, partially thawed stream. The rising water and melting ice had partially exposed her body. She was still wearing the distinctive red coat and cap. The discovery was devastating, but the crime scene itself presented an immediate and complex puzzle for the medical examiner and investigators. The autopsy revealed several critical, conflicting factors. The injuries. Manon had suffered a severe gash to her forehead and had multiple broken bones, including fractures that suggested considerable force. The location. The stream was shallow and frozen. The medical examiner could not definitively conclude whether these injuries were the cause of death or if they were post-mortem injuries inflicted by the freezing, jagged ice of the stream or from a fall into it. The cause of death, COD. Crucially, no definitive cause of death could be established. There were no immediate, obvious signs of a lethal blow or mechanism. Assault evidence. While the possibility of sexual assault was examined, the forensic evidence was ultimately inconclusive under the standards of the time. This led investigators to a firm and chilling conclusion. Manon Dubé's body was moved. The injuries, particularly the extent of the broken bones and the lack of blood at the scene, strongly suggested she had died elsewhere, perhaps at the hands of the killer in the burgundy sedan, and had been stored for weeks. The fact that the body was discovered at the start of the spring thaw suggests the killer may have panicked as the weather warmed, realizing the place of concealment, a shed, basement, or garage, was no longer secure. The perpetrator had not only committed murder, but had successfully managed the disposal and concealment of evidence for over 100 days. This indicated a killer who was methodical, likely local enough to know the rural dumping spot, and cold enough to maintain his secret for months while the town was in turmoil. With a homicide confirmed and the scene established as a dumping ground, the investigation pivoted entirely to profiling the killer and chasing down specific types of leads. Who in Sherbrooke owned a burgundy sedan, had access to a concealed storage area, and was capable of such cold-blooded murder? Theory A, the local predator, the burgundy sedan. The focus remained heavily on the man in the car. Police believed the most likely scenario was a local individual who drove the main routes near the restaurant, perhaps a delivery driver, a shift worker, or someone familiar with Manon's schedule. The ability to keep the body hidden for so long pointed to someone with access, a secluded basement, a rural cottage, or a large industrial property. Composure, the ability to live a normal life while the town searched frantically. Theory B, the border connection. Sherbrooke is a short distance from the U.S. border. Investigators explored the possibility of a killer who used the border to escape justice, either an American who crossed into Canada or a Canadian who quickly fled south. This theory, however, never yielded any concrete cross-border leads or suspects. Theory C, the hoax perpetrator. Could the person who placed the hoax call from Montreal be the killer? This theory posits that the killer placed the call as a masterstroke of misdirection, using a payphone 160 kilometers away to ensure police looked in the wrong place, thus giving him more time to dispose of the body before the spring thaw. While highly unlikely given the logistics, the level of malice in the hoax makes it impossible to dismiss a connection. A significant hurdle was the lack of sophisticated tracking. Fingerprinting was possible, but DNA analysis was decades away. The primary tools were witnesses, geographical searches, and shoe leather detective work, all of which had been stymied by the weather, the hoax, and the killer's cold efficiency. Over the years, names have been circulated, men with criminal records who were active in the region at the time, but none could be definitively placed in the burgundy sedan, and none of the existing evidence provided the solid link required for an arrest. The killer remained a ghost, hidden by a common car color and a seemingly perfect crime. The tragedy of Manon Dubé is amplified by its context. Manon was not an isolated victim. Her case is one of several disappearances and murders of young women that occurred across the eastern townships, a geographical and thematic cluster suggesting the presence of a mobile, serial predator. One of the most comparable and equally heartbreaking cases is that of Louise Cameron. Louise was 20 when she vanished from a bus stop in Sherbrooke in 1977, the exact same year Manon was taken. Like Manon, her body was found dumped in a rural, secluded area months later. The similarities are chilling. Young, local female victims. Last seen near major routes in the Sherbrooke area. Bodies concealed and then dumped in rural, peripheral locations. inconclusive forensic evidence regarding the exact cause of death. These parallel cold cases paint a terrifying picture of a man who was actively hunting and operating in the region for years. The killer was clearly comfortable moving his victims and disposing of evidence, demonstrating a clear pattern of behavior. The police have often treated these cases as linked, believing the person who took Manon Dubé is the same person responsible for several other attacks during this period. The eastern townships were seemingly terrorized by one man who preyed on the youth with impunity, shielded by the vast, quiet wilderness of Quebec. To this day, the serial predator who may have murdered Manon Dubé has never been identified. The file was officially reopened in 2001, thanks to the tireless efforts of Manon's family, particularly her sister Chantal Dubé. The hope was pinned entirely on advancements in forensic science. Modern DNA analysis can work with samples that were previously considered too degraded or too small. However, the reality of working with evidence collected in 1978 proved incredibly difficult. The methods of collection, storage, and preservation were simply not up to modern standards. While investigators continue to re-examine all remaining artifacts, the biological evidence needed to definitively link a modern suspect to the crime remains frustratingly elusive. The case of Manon Dubé stands as a haunting testament to a perfect storm of failure. The critical time lost to the weather, the betrayal of the Montreal hoax, and the sophistication of a killer who used the vast, isolating geography of the eastern townships to conceal his evil act. Manon was 14. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. She vanished on a short walk home, defined by her bright red coat. The man in the burgundy car stole her future. But cold cases are never truly closed. They are waiting for one small piece of information, one conversation, one conscience to break. The killer is older now, but he still carries the secret. Someone in Sherbrooke knows. Someone knows the man who drove the burgundy sedan, who owned a secluded spot to hide a body, and who shattered a family 47 years ago. If you have any information, no matter how small or insignificant you think it is, regarding Manon Dubé's disappearance and murder in 1977, or any of the Eastern Township's cold cases, please contact law enforcement immediately. It is never too late for justice. For the Case Files Mind of Madness, I'm your narrator, and we thank you for watching. Hey there! Before you take off, we'd just like to take a second and say that we really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Katie and I are so grateful for the incredible Case Files community, so thank you for being a part of it. If you want to help the Case Files continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. We want you to know that we truly appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, and we hope to see you soon.